welcome to today's episode of the Fight for Love podcast. I welcome the people watching on YouTube because I'm not live, but it's recorded live. So don't even say that. Anyway, you can watch everything I do. So every screw up, everything that I'm saying weirdly or do funny things. Like you can just watch me do stuff on my YouTube channel, Cats, Coffee, and Kickboxing. And of course, you can listen to me on Spotify, on iTunes, and on my website, www.itsuptoyou.ch/podcast. Okay, today, I want to talk about chronic traumatic encephalopathy, short CTE. Now, CTE is a neurologic condition which is linked to repetitive head trauma. So repetitive head trauma, such as in different kinds of sports, right? Obviously, I got interested in it since I do combat sports, and I want to differentiate martial arts and combat sports. In my opinion, martial arts is more the softer version, where you don't get hit in the head as much. Your sparring is not as intense. Maybe it can be, but usually it's not. That's my experience. Correct me if I'm wrong. But combat sports is actually where you go in combat. You train for combat, right? So you go into the ring and you fight in the ring, and your blows are gonna be harder. So you're gonna hit somebody. You can KO somebody if you want to, or you can get KO yourself. Whether it's in boxing with the hands or in kickboxing you can get kicked in the head, you can get punched in the head, obviously, or even elbowed, depending on the rules you're fighting under. And CTE is something that's still pretty young, but it's also occurring in, it's very prominent in football, American football, because of the tackles and people running into each other and head traumas occurring from there. Ice hockey is a big one too. I don't know if you've ever been to ice hockey much. It's like one of the only sports I sometimes like to watch because there's something happening, besides martial arts, obviously, or combat sports. But I mean, there's a lot of head trauma going on in ice hockey too. Soccer is one with the head, the head balls. Do you call them head ball? We call them head balls. It's a funny word. Well, with just getting like this. Yeah, hitting the ball with your head. If you can see me now, I kind of did the movement. I'd be good at soccer. I suck at soccer. And also, sometimes it has been visible with veterans, like people who have gone to war. Well, of course, I mean, God only knows what they have to endure. And yeah, of course, combat sports, as I said. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. As I said, it's a neurologic condition linked to repetitive head trauma. Symptoms can appear years after. So you can do your sport and not have any problems, and years after you retired, you get symptoms. Symptoms can be memory deficits, abnormal behavior, such as impulsivity or rage, being enraged really fast, mood disturbances, movement problems with executive functions. It can get kind of similar to Alzheimer's or even Parkinson's disease. And it does get worse over time. And the reason for that is in CTE, proteins disrupt cellular communication in the brain. And it is associated with degeneration and even death of neurons in the brain. So it kind of spreads in the brain, and that's how it gets worse over time. So usually it's not quite known yet how severe the hits on the head have to be, or if you can get it from, like, say you had an accident, you had one concussion, can you develop CTE? We don't know yet. They, like, medical, I'm saying we like I'm a doctor, but I'm not, obviously. I'm like, sorry, ugh, there's something in my mouth, cat hair. Anyway, they're not sure yet whether it really has to be like they think it has to do with getting hit repetitively, but it's not quite sure yet. But yeah, it's what's obvious is that you have to have had hits on your head, and that can be a concussion, as well as subconcussive hits. And according to the CTE Center, located at the Boston University School of Medicine, a concussion has occurred anytime that you got a blow to the head and experienced symptoms. And symptoms can vary, right? There can be blurred vision, there can be seeing stars. I've actually had that one before. I got kicked in the head in training. Even just sensitivity to light after, or nausea, headaches, even fatigue. So if you get hit in the head, I think you can develop these symptoms pretty darn fast, my opinion. But yeah, so it's kind of hard to say is it a concussion or not. But if you've experienced any of these symptoms, which I think a lot of people in these high contact sports have, it sort of is a concussion, I guess. So where was I? Oh yeah, exactly. So especially in the NFL, it's a really, really prominent thing. They say, like, I maybe a short disclaimer on this side, right here. My research was YouTube, Google, Google Scholar, looking at studies, looking at researches. Also, I looked at, as I said, the CTE Center of Boston University School of Medicine. I looked at the Swiss Boxing Association, and this is where I get my information from. So I have not conducted any studies myself or research. I'm obviously not in that field. I don't work in that field. So I just want to give you guys the information that I was able to get from the sources that I have. A lot of things are not clear yet about CTE, and everything I say, there might be something else to it that I don't know. So don't take what I say as the only truth, because there's just so much more that I don't know, and even medical people don't know about this. And if you're a medical professional watching or listening to this, first of all, welcome. Nice to hear you, see you, or you hear me, whatever. Anyway, if there's anything that I got wrong, please let me know. Let me know in the comments. Let me know. And I'd also would really love to have a medical professional on this podcast and talk to me about CTE, because I'm really, really curious. I want to know everything there is. Anyway, moving on. I seen one video where they say that NFL athletes, like pro athletes, over 90% of them had CTE in the brain. CTE pathology in the brain. And also 1/3 of the amateur players. Now, what kind of strikes me as weird here is that I read repetitively that CTE is only people are only able to tell if somebody had CTE pathology in the brain after a person has disease, so after a person is dead. So I'm not sure where these numbers come from. If they had just looked at so many NFL players that are already dead, maybe, probably, but yeah. Anyway, it's still early research, and CT does not seem to occur in everybody who has had repetitive head trauma. So some people get away with it. It's probably like smoking, right? Some people get away with it, others develop cancer. But the takeaway is CT is more common than you might think, and it does not limit itself to pro sports, but also amateurs get it. And yeah, that kind of begs the question, or raises the question: are these high contact sports still good for us, or should we avoid them? I mean, I'm sure we need to be aware, and we have to take measures to reduce the risk as far as that's possible. I'll get back to this later. I want to talk about prevention of CTE. Prevention is, well, first one is obvious, but is reducing the number of hits to the head. I remember one guy, like when I was in Kung Fu, I did over 10 years of Kung Fu, and we were talking about how in kickboxers you can tell, like, the shins, the bones in the shins of kickboxers, or people that kick stuff a lot, I guess, their bone structure gets thicker. And sometimes what people do in combat sports is they hit their shins on purpose with a stick or whatever to make them grow stronger, so they won't feel the pain as much when they kick somebody. And actually that's often part of training, like not doing that, but it's often part of training to kicking each other to kind of get used to the pain and kind of numb the shins. And anyway, one guy was that was in Kung Fu with me, he was like, yeah, I see that documentary about Shaolin monks, and they actually did this with their heads. Like they would hit their head repetitively against, I think it was a punching bag or something, like a hard punching bag. And then brain scans had shown that their layers or their bone structure on the skull got thicker too. And I was like, what? I don't know if that's true. I don't know. It's crazy to me. It seems crazy. And now reading and hearing and educating myself about CTE, it seems rather dumb, to be honest. Just don't, like, your shins is one thing, but your brain is pretty freaking important. So just be careful what you do. Again, I don't know if that documentary really existed. If it does, let me know. If you know what it is, I would love to watch it. But yeah, it seems a little over the top. But anyway, okay. So obviously, prevention, reducing the number of hits to the head. Also, after brain trauma, if you've experienced brain trauma, get proper medical treatment and take your time before going back into your sport. So don't just, if your doctor says no sports for 2 weeks, don't just wait 3 days, get up and be like, oh, I feel better, and then participate in your sport again. Again, I know I keep saying that, but give your body time to heal. Regeneration is huge. It's really important, and it's often overlooked. So okay, yeah, and well, leave your game after injury. This is not possible in boxing or kickboxing if you're in a fight, because, well, the goal is kind of to get somebody to not be able to fight anymore. So, but I mean, you can leave a game if you're doing team sports. Obviously, if you get hurt or you get your head hit, You can say, I'm done. You can also do that in, you can do that in, like, if you're doing a sparring session, you got hit in the head, maybe instead of going back in or keep going, just stop, take a break, go home. Also, this brings me to my next point. This is one of mine. I added this. Don't try to be the tough guy or the tough girl. And I'm saying this from experience. Remember I told you I got kicked in the head and I saw stars? And because I'm a kickboxer, because I wanted to do more fights, because I knew I had to be able to handle a blow like that, even if it gets me into this really weird kind of sensation of experiencing the world around me. Like, you get hit, you get a little dizzy and stuff, and you kind of have to keep going, because you can't just back out in a fight. And I mean, obviously you want to win, right? But I mean, a fight is one thing. We can argue about that forever, but in training, don't try to be the tough guy, don't try to be the tough girl. So if you get hit in the head in training during sparring sessions, just have the have the balls to say, I'm done, and it doesn't mean you're not tough. It doesn't mean you can't deal with stress or pressure, but it means you take care of your health. And I think that's really important. Also, for all the martial arts out there, martial artists and all the combat sports people out there, if you're training, train safely. Like, for example, I think this is a really big one. Sometimes we do exercises that we punch each other, right? And like, one person punches, the other person takes their boxing gloves to their heads, and it's either I take the boxing gloves to my head to kind of soften the blow, but you still get the blows on your head, right? Or you can take your hands, your boxing gloves out, the other person just hits into the glove. And for me, before I'd known about CTE, like, I think I even did that last week, I felt like, okay, I have to get used to this, right? I have to get used to getting hit in the head. So I take my boxing gloves to my head and kind of just take the blows. I'll be fine. I have to get used to this. But now, knowing this, I know it might be better to just let the other person punch into my gloves and not, like, on my head with the gloves in between. And I think if we know, this is why I think it's so important to know about these things and to know about CTE, because if we know this, we can take prevention measures, we can be safer, we can avoid any sort of trauma to the head that is not, quote unquote, necessary in our sport. Then stop playing the tough guy, because especially in martial arts and combat sports, people always have to act super tough. And I mean, I'm sitting in front of you. If you see me now, I'm like, have my Venom hoodie, which is a martial arts brand, I guess. I have my snapback cap. I know sometimes even I try to play the tough girl, but I wish I could say I've grown out of it. But I think there's a difference between kind of showing to yourself what you're capable of doing and just going through something that seems to be really hard for yourself, and between trying to show to everybody else how tough you are, because that's just not, that doesn't help you at all. So proving something to yourself, okay, do that, but don't try to prove yourself to others. I think this is really important, and I think this is something a lot of combat sports people and also martial arts people can take away from this. Like, kind of try to tune down your ego a little bit. And I know it's hard because I've been there, I'm still there, and trying to deal with that. But I mean, you get older, it gets better, I guess. But just yeah, don't try to be the tough guy, girl, whatever. I think this is really important. Okay, so I also looked at the Swiss Boxing Association. It's swissboxing.ch. They tell us, according to medical doctor Georges Perret, he's president of the Boxing Medical Commission in France. According to him, he says to avoid CTE, well, avoid, quote unquote, you can avoid it, but you can minimize the risk. To minimize the risk of CTE, avoid the following: long, long-lasting careers, longer than 12 years. Comebacks after longer careers. Participating in fights when you're older than 35. This hurts me particularly bad. Also uneven fights. Uneven fights, probably, I think he's talking about like the way, like, I mean, you have weight classes in boxing, but I guess if you could bring together a really small guy and a really big guy who has obviously more strength and harder punches, and so when you get punched by somebody who's stronger than you, I mean, he'll just gonna have, or she is gonna have more strength than you and hurt you even worse. So uneven fights, and they're really just saying that it's really important for the trainers and the people who do the fighting events to really take all the measures necessary to avoid people having too many impacts, like too many hits on their head, which I know is kind of ironic since it's boxing, but I think personally that you can take measures to avoid that, and you should. And also, like, your trainers, while you fight, your trainers watching from the outside, they can end the fight anytime, and maybe that's something we should take part in. I don't know. It raises the question: should we ban boxing and combat sports? Well, of course, I'm not gonna say no. Yes, I'm not gonna say yes. Of course not. Like, try hockey in Switzerland. Try soccer in Switzerland, in Europe. Try to ban that. Good luck with it. Try to ban football, American football in the USA. I mean, forget it, you know? I think, like, people often kind of point their finger at boxing or kickboxing because it's just two people hitting each other. I mean, I get if it's not somebody's thing to watch, but in the end, the blows to the head or the injuries your body takes away from it, they're not worse than most team sports where you kind of just always clash into each other, especially sports like American football and ice hockey. So in the end, sports are always kind of dangerous, and I think we have to kind of evaluate, like sports like these high risk sports, they're still really good for you. They're still really good for your cardiovascular system, for everything. I mean, sports has so many good effects on your body, medically speaking, but also on your mind, especially also mental, like also overcoming things, overcoming hard challenges, knowing what you're capable of, training for something, getting better at it. There's so much, it gives you so much confidence back, especially combat sports, martial arts give you so much confidence and an ability to defend yourself and to stand up for yourself. And I think kind of trying to weigh the risk of CTE with the benefits of these high impact sports, I think the best thing we can do is to just take measures as good as we can to avoid people suffering from CTE in the future. And again, it's still something that's really young. It's still something that people are trying to figure out what's exactly behind it. So the research is ongoing. Things are still not completely clear. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know whether we're going to find some sort of cure or something that really minimizes the risk. Until then, we have to kind of create, I think, associations around sports to be responsible and to take the responsibility to make it as safe as possible inside the sport. And also, yeah, like teach their trainers and their athletes how to avoid taking risks that are not necessary. Also, especially in boxing, imagine not having these associations or trainers that know about CTE and just kind of just saying like, no, we're not going to box anymore. It's forbidden. It's just going to go into the underground, like Fight Club style, and that's where damage really, like, that's when it gets wild. That's when it gets that's when there's no rules to the game. That's where dangerous practices come back, like hits on the back of your head, which are not allowed in combat sports. That's where it gets dangerous, and when that's where it gets to like the criminal underground where nobody cares about the well-being of their athletes. So my opinion, we should just take all measures possible to reduce the risk of CTE and be aware of it. And we have to know about this. We as athletes have to know about the risks of CTE, whether we're amateurs like I am, whether we're pros, whether we're just training people, or just try to avoid it. Try to avoid risks that are not necessary. Try to avoid proving yourself, showing how tough you are. You don't have to. Also, something that that I find a really good argument is like, take Switzerland for example, and like rock climbing for example. How many people a year die in the Swiss mountains because they're climbing somewhere, they're falling from the mountains, they get lost while hiking, and the weather changes really fast in the Alps, and people regularly get lost, or they fall because they couldn't see because there was fog coming in. Also skiing, I mean, no matter how hard we try to avoid it, there's always people getting into avalanches. Every year there's people dying in avalanches, even on the ski tracks. Even if we try to avoid it, we can never we can minimize the risks, but we can never completely avoid the risks of sports. Sports are dangerous, they always will be, and all we can do is minimize the risks. And until then, enjoy what sports does to us, like to our mental health, to our bodies, how it changes us for the better, and embrace the game, and just take care of yourself and be aware, and know what you're dealing with. And yeah, that's it. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. If you have any comments, please drop them below this video, or let me know. Reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram at It's Up to You Personal Training, or on LinkedIn, Tanya Mader, Mader. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you learned something. I certainly did. It was a lot of fun. If there's a medical professional out there who would like to come on my podcast and talk to me about CTE, I would be so happy. This can be in English or in German or in Swiss. And yeah, don't forget, you are stronger than you think. Bye bye. Take care.